Border Patrol agent Juan David Ortiz remains behind bars tonight, accused of murdering 4 women in Laredo in the last 2 weeks. Authorities are calling him a rogue agent and a serial killer. They say he preyed on some of the most vulnerable members of the community. Eyewitness border reporter Oscar Margain has more.
Local and state police are seen in this cell phone video surrounding a Laredo hotel late Friday night as they move to capture 35-year-old Juan David Ortiz, a 10-year veteran of the Border Patrol and who authorities say is a confessed serial killer.
He was apprehended without incident.
His alleged crimes and his arrest detailed during a press conference Monday, where Webb County investigators revealed Ortiz targeted women who shared a similar profile and who were all shot and their bodies dumped in remote areas.
These victims would engage in either drug use or sex workers.
Investigators say Ortiz knew the 4 victims. The first, found on September 3rd, identified as 29-year-old Melissa Ramirez. 10 days later, the body of 42-year-old Claudine Loera was discovered, while 28-year-old Humberto Ortiz, also known as Janelle, and a 4th victim, not yet identified, were found around the time a 5th woman escaped from Ortiz's custody and flagged down a DPS trooper.
It's a vulnerable community, a community that is defenseless and has very little or no credibility.
Also in attendance, the chief of the U.S. Border Patrol, Carla Provost, whose agency has come under fire, with this case being the 2nd murder and the 3rd shooting death involving a Laredo agent in 6 months.
And we have a peer support and a chaplaincy program, as well as a veteran support program. I'm meeting with all of those individuals, the leadership team here, and these are some of the things that we are working on to see how we can better support our men and women in the area.
Provost assured the Border Patrol maintains high hiring standards and referred to the suspects as rogue agents. Ortiz was placed under indefinite suspension without pay. The accused murderer, who's under a $2.5 million bond, signing off that night with a farewell message to his wife and kids. Meanwhile, police are combing through a pile of evidence as they try figuring out the motive behind the murders. In Laredo, near the Texas-Mexico border, I'm Oscar Margain reporting.